All right, we're live. Welcome to Mom's Maths and Manuscripts. And today is a special episode for me because I've been thinking about it for a very long time, maybe since the beginning of Mom's Maths and Manuscripts. And now the stars have aligned. I will explain what I mean later. And today our guest is Dr. Lauren Mason. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Lauren Mason is a Tufts University trained cognitive psychologist and consultant who helps community and technical colleges implement AI into their curriculum to support student opportunity and success after graduation. In her spare time, she enjoys sharing insights from her own academic journey, which is how I know you. With her Instagram community, Lauren Finds a Way. And most excitingly and very fittingly for the podcast, she is a wife and soon to be mom to a baby boy.
Yes.
Congratulations, first of all.
Thank you so
And
much.
one more time, a very warm welcome here. I'm super excited because, yeah, as I said, I was thinking, and even at the very beginning when this podcast was a two co-host situation, we were both discussing that Lauren Finds a Way is the perfect guest. We should try to get you on the podcast.
Oh,
And
thank
then when I
you.
saw that you shared the news of your pregnancy, I was like, okay, that's perfect. This just fits so well.
Yes.
And so thank
Wonderful.
you for finding the time. I
Absolutely.
understand that, yeah, during pregnancy, you have a lot on your mind, a lot on your to-do list.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's definitely a whirlwind, but I'm glad that we were able to land on a time that worked for both of us. I'm excited to speak with you more today.
thank you. So I basically primarily wanted to talk to you about motherhood and family planning in academia or around academia,
Right.
but maybe we can start a little bit with your academic journey and just briefly the experiences of your PhD and um, what you've seen, what you experienced that made you also start your Instagram and your blog, Lauren Finds a Way. How did that come to life, your first baby?
Sure. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So let's see. I got my undergraduate degree in psychology and holistic health at San Francisco State University. That's where I was sort of introduced to the world of research and absolutely fell in love with research. I was in two labs in undergrad and was just really, really blessed with a lot of great opportunities. And so I knew I wanted to continue on that path. I really wanted to become a professor. So next step was pursuing my PhD at Tufts, which is a small school near Harvard, just outside of Boston. And so that's where I studied cognitive psychology. I did my dissertation on metacognition and map learning, actually, which is really interesting. So, looking at how people can sort of monitor and control their own learning process with maps and complex visual displays. And then after my PhD, I was met with the fact that there weren't really many opportunities to find a job as a professor. I was already with my husband. We actually met back in undergrad. So this is our 13th year together, our first year married. And so he is an eye doctor. And I knew that we kind of wanted to come back to California where we were both from and sort of put down roots. And I wasn't really willing to go just anywhere in order to become a professor. I wasn't really willing to make that sacrifice anymore. So I needed to start looking into other opportunities. And I was really interested in learning. I had always been interested in how we could optimize learning outcomes. A lot of my research, though it was sort of variable in the specific topics, it all fell under that umbrella of
Mhm.
the jobs I was interested in were in education. And so I ended up coming across an opportunity to do a postdoc within education where I was looking at implementing AI into curriculum for career and technical colleges. And that's the route that I took. So I think it was around 2 months that I was actively doing work for that postdoc as I was preparing to defend my dissertation at the same time. Ultimately, ended up defending and then was in the postdoc as a senior research associate until I got degree conferral. And it just so happened that around the time I got conferral, I was offered a promotion as co-PI on the grant. So I kind of ultimately ended up skipping the postdoc step, the postdoc title. And that's what I'm doing now is I'm a co-PI on this grant that helps community and technical colleges implement AI in their curriculum. So it's kind of a little bit of a roundabout journey, but I think it's important to share with people because I know for so many of us, when we are coming to the end of our PhD, we're going through a lot of things, right? It can feel a little bit like an identity crisis. We are dealt with, met with the difficulties of the job market, which I know is an issue for people everywhere right now and PhDs everywhere. And so, yeah, I think it's helpful to hear about different people's paths and how they aren't always so obvious or direct, but ultimately we can find a way to something that makes sense for us.
Absolutely. And this is also something that I am now very curious about and like interested in talking to other people about and use as well. Because I feel like often when we are in this academic track, we are a little bit blinded to everything else in
Yeah.
the whole world that is existing outside of it.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
the other career paths, maybe a bit unconventional, other opportunities, and we don't really think about it. We're very much like, okay, master's, PhD, postdoc, another postdoc, then maybe professorship, or if you're in STEM field, like, I don't know,
Right.
industry, whatever, pharma.
Mhm.
Um, and we don't really think about what else is out there. So it's really, yeah, as you said, it's important to talk about this maybe roundabout things and
Yeah.
maybe, yeah, how you ended
I
up in a space that makes sense and fulfills you.
Right. Yes, I agree. Definitely agree. I think we need a lot more transparency about those paths and opportunities because it's like you said, we sort of have these blinders on and it's kind of adaptive throughout the education journey because we really have to just focus. It's, focusing on that goal, attaining that goal of completion. And then we get there sometimes and it's like, well, what do I do now? And we have to kind of quickly learn about what's happening in the world around us, in order to find our next step. And a lot of times there's not much guidance from advisors, right? Because maybe they had a more clear path just with when they got their degrees that is a little bit more obvious. There may have been more opportunity. So yeah, we're at this phase now as PhDs in this modern era where we have to get creative.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that you wanted to be a professor and
Did.
you sort of, you very early on knew how this path is going to be structured and then you found
Yes.
yourself on a different
Yeah.
journey. Okay, that's very interesting. Also, when it comes to motherhood and family planning, like how did
Mhm.
that fit into your picture? Because if you wanted to be a professor, again, my feeling would or was in the past that
Mhm.
there is never a good time, and you are always kind of reaching that for that next goal, waiting for
Yes.
the next time point where you kind of feel a little bit more stable. So maybe, you get a PhD position. Okay, you're stable, but it's not also very short, so you cannot really have a family then. Maybe a
Right.
postdoc, but it's also not very stable, and so on. How
Yeah.
did you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one thing I will say is years ago now, I met with someone during some sort of a conference-led networking event, and she was a tenure track professor and she had a family, and I asked her about that. And she said basically what you just said, that there really is never going to be the perfect time or the right time. It doesn't really exist. So, you kind of just have to do what feels right to you when you are ready, whatever readiness means as well when it comes to becoming a mother. But you just have to do, what you want to do and kind of be a little bit unapologetic about that,
Mhm.
and allow everyone else around you to adjust. And so I always had that in the back of my mind where, okay, when the time comes and I feel ready, that I will just have to move forward with it. But I mean, it still is scary, right? And even now, how I sort of am like, I'm within education, so I'm within higher education. But again, I'm not a professor, but I still am feeling like those pressures of the fact that, I am becoming a mother and I'm going to have this entirely new aspect of my identity and I'm going to have to somehow manage to integrate that with my work life as well. And of course there are fears of disappointing others, right? Because I think as PhDs, it's part of our survival strategy really is to make sure that we're kind of always pleasing right? Our advisors, for instance, making sure that we maintain our funding or our support or whatever it is. And the risk of that goal being taken away from us, I think, is so terrifying. I know that's how I felt about it, because you invest so much. So, kind of letting go of that mindset a little bit. And again, I think learning to be more unapologetic has been a really big part of my pregnancy journey. And I would imagine that's only going to continue and unfold once I am a mother.
I like that you mentioned unapologetic. How was your process? What was your process to learn to be unapologetic about it?
Yeah, I think everyone reacts differently to when we announce that we are pregnant, right? That's something that I've encountered as well. It's not just with, people we work with, but family and friends, everyone has their own feelings about it, right? And I suppose that's valid. Um, so just encountering different reactions that I've received from different people that I've worked with, I think has been sort of eye-opening. And it's obviously a very vulnerable thing, right? When you do become pregnant, also early on, we lost a twin, so there were some challenges there as well. And I was continuing to work, of course, throughout that process. I didn't, share too much about what was happening with the people that I was working with until a little bit after. But just how some people have more of a capacity to support, and I think others are maybe more caught up in, the challenges of their own lives, their own concerns with the work itself. And so, again, learning to kind of free myself from other people's feelings and reactions to things I was going through, I think was a really important part of this journey for me. And
Mhm.
again, quickly helped me realize that I need to be a little bit more unapologetic about my own needs and expectations and limitations, but then also maintaining the fact that I'm totally capable of doing my job. And just because I'm pregnant or just because I'm, becoming a mother, it doesn't mean that I suddenly am incapable, because I think we can sometimes pick up on those sort of vibes from people as well, where people look at us differently all of a sudden. I
Mhm.
don't know if you've kind of experienced that feeling before, but I did. I felt like sometimes people I was working with suddenly looked at me differently.
Yeah.
And so that too, I had to kind of like free myself from that and not worry about it so much and just have the confidence in knowing my own abilities.
Yeah, I mean, people do definitely look at you a little bit like you're so fragile all of a sudden.
Yeah,
Maybe, yeah,
different.
expect slightly different things like mom brain, and that all of
Yeah.
a sudden you are not going to be as capable. But
Right. And also, I think, I found that some people were looking forward to the future for me and like, oh, well, maybe now I won't be able to do certain things, right? Like, kind of anticipating the fact that I might quit in the future
Mhm.
because I'm starting a family. Even though I've always envisioned myself still having some sort of a career while having a family, that's something that is important to me personally. But yeah, I got that impression from people. And so not taking that on, right? Like learning how to not take on what other people are maybe expecting from you, even if they have no basis to this expectation, I think is important
and difficult.
and so difficult. It's
Yeah,
so difficult. Yeah.
for sure. Okay, you mentioned so many things, and I like my
Yes,
brain is going in all the different directions because I
I
want to talk
understand.
about this and that and that. So we talk about identity. I think we'll come back to that a little bit later.
Sure.
But when it comes to academia and maybe also certain careers, and also you're in education, so maybe education is also kind of like this field is also a little bit prone to that. Do you think certain environments are just more they like people expect that you are going to want to sacrifice everything in your personal life to the altar of science or education or working with people, let's say doctors with patients and so on, that they get very uncomfortable when something personal happens, whether good or bad, and you share or you have to, adjust as you're working, the way you're working, as you navigate it.
I do think so. I think that there is this tendency within, we'll start by just saying, let's say within academia. I think there is this tendency to feel as though when we decide to become lifelong academics, right, we do make a lot of sacrifices and we're sort of like dedicating ourselves to that pursuit, right? The pursuit of knowledge or whatever you want to call it. And yes, a lot of times family, personal life kind of goes on the back burner for that reason. I have seen that continue within, now I'm working sort of within more of the higher education space generally, and I've heard about it happening in different spaces as well. It does also happen in industry. But what I've learned, I think, within the past year or so is a big piece is who you are working with, the actual individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think within any sort of industry or area, you're going to encounter people that, yeah, they want you to sacrifice everything for the work. And they probably have done the same thing, right? And so that's why you need to do it too. But then you can also encounter people that are extremely supportive of, the fact that you want to have a healthy personal life or you want to start a family. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been fortunate to also encounter those people and work with those people too. And that's been really so amazing and helpful. So I think it comes down to who you're working with. And you know, um, maybe moving forward in the future, I will have kind of more of that insight to identify that when I'm beginning roles, right? But I think that when you're coming out of your PhD, you are just trying to find an opportunity that kind of aligns and makes sense. And you kind of have that mindset of lacking and you maybe don't have this confidence yet that you need and all of these things. So I think it's all part of growth in our careers to uncover the things that actually do matter. And now that I'm starting a family, those things, are a lot different because in the past, if my advisor didn't have a strong work-life balance, for instance, I was able to sort of remove myself from that a bit and just understand, okay, well, this is how I want to do things differently, right? But when you are actually in the job market and working, it can be a little bit different, where it helps to have a little bit more alignment with those that you're working with, I think, because again, these things happen within our lives and within our families. And if you can receive support during those times, I think it is really transformative.
Definitely. But as you correctly said, like when you're just starting, it's difficult to kind of discern and figure out
Yeah.
whether the environment is going to be the way you want it.
Exactly. And I think, we all put on our best faces
Mm-hmm.
when we are trying to find a role, right? Not just us, but then also the people that are maybe are hiring us or that we're going to be collaborating with. We all do that. And so, yeah, it can be difficult, like you said, to discern. It can be intimidating to advocate for ourselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, when you're just finishing your PhD, you're definitely not unapologetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
All you know to do is apologize. So yes, it's definitely a growth process and has required a lot of growth. And like I said, I know that I have a lot more growing to do, and I think that in itself is a little bit intimidating. It's an intimidating aspect of becoming a mother is realizing how much you have to learn and how quickly you're going to learn it. That's scary for me. But it's also, exciting and sort of precious in its own way.
It is exciting. It is, I mean, it's going to be all the things.
Yes.
From a fellow boy mom,
Yes,
it's going to be
exactly.
a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you said, it is exciting and it's going to be also really fun. Did you have to, so when you started this job, did you have to like or pre-warn people that you are, newly married and you're probably going to think about starting a family, or did you try to figure out what their policies are at the beginning? How did that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I started this, it was with the university. Like I mentioned, I got hired for a postdoc position and they gave me sort of a title of senior research associate until I got conferral. So at that time, I did have things like, paid medical leave, like maternity leave, and I had health insurance and I had all of those things. And so I knew that if I were to become pregnant, I would have those benefits. The people I was working with, they did know that I was newly married. I got married during the first year of that position. So they knew that. I don't remember explicitly speaking about the fact that I was going to start a family, but I also didn't say that I wasn't, right? It was just not a topic that I remember discussing. But then what ultimately happened is there were a lot of changes that occurred within kind of the grant and the team and the structure of things within that first year. And so, like I mentioned, I was offered a promotion to co-PI. But in doing that, we also left the university. We pulled the grant from that university and put it with a different entity. And I had to actually start my own consulting business in order to continue on. And so that's now I'm a consultant and I have this client, and that's how I do the work that I'm doing. And in becoming a consultant, sort of an independent contractor, I lost all those benefits. So I no longer was going to have the paid leave. And that all occurred at the beginning of my pregnancy. So that was sort of a lot to process was not only was I at the beginning of my pregnancy having to get onto my husband's health insurance, which fortunately we were able to do quickly, um, but it was just a lot of change, right? A lot of change, not
Course.
just with suddenly I have more role responsibility. My title is different. I'm starting my own business as well. So there were kind of a lot of hoops I had to jump through for that. But then realizing what the next year would look like with bringing a child into the world and not having paid maternity leave. So that has been a process as well of taking the good with the bad, right? For in one sense, I have a lot of flexibility in my work and my hours, which has been absolutely amazing with being pregnant. I mean, it saved me in the first trimester to be able to work when I was feeling okay. Um, and I've really enjoyed that flexibility, and I think it will be great once the baby is here. But then at the same time, adjusting to the fact that I don't have those benefits anymore. So yeah, there's some nuances and complexities, I think, to whatever career path we take, right? But that's just my experience right now.
I mean, with the lack of maternal leave, is like US is a completely different beast with that. Like for
Okay.
us in Europe, we are terrified by this. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm both in shock and amazed at the fact that you're speaking about it so calmly. I think I would be panicking and just
Yeah.
completely out of it. But
Right.
um, may I ask what you're plan like? How are you planning to combine newborn and work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm working a lot right now in preparation so that some things can sort of run themselves more or less. And the people that I am working closely with have been very supportive. My husband also will be taking some time, so that will help in the early stages. And then we are going to have to find help as well. So
Mm,
we're sort of looking into that now to receive some help with childcare too.
mm,
Which, of course, again, is challenging. And I think many things we won't really know until the baby is here and we're doing it, right? So we're just going to have to kind of roll with the punches and adjust and adapt as it's all happening. At the same time, I'm fully aware that it does take a village. And so I am going to accept any and all help and support that I can
mm.
to get all of us through that time and to try and also sort of be present, right? And really embrace and soak it up once he's here.
There is something that, yeah, you mentioned about taking a village that I am absolutely so like I'm first of all in agreement and also really passionate about it. And Um, I think this is a point that I want to come back to again later that, asking for help is difficult already.
Mhm.
And then I think with an academic background, there is another layer of difficulty because you're always so independent and your own, research,
Right.
your own project, and then your baby. And how do you ask for help? How do you like manage this? But also before we go there, I wanted to say that, I mean, wow, it's a lot of challenges that you are describing. And during the pregnancy and that with the lack of maternity leave and this all these changes that you've talked about, what was there for you sort of to help you feel grounded and like, okay, I can do it? What are your, I don't know, anchors, practices? What do you do to stay sane, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. Fortunately, I have a wonderful husband. So I think first and foremost, your partner really matters, right? Especially when you're moving through challenging times, right? Your partner is so important. And so I am so thankful to him and how much he has supported me throughout the pregnancy. Also, prayer. I'm praying constantly, and just any sort of way that we can kind of release, right, and give it up to the universe or a higher power, whatever it is, I think is also really transformative and has helped me so much throughout difficult times in my life and exciting times too, right? So yeah, I would say those are the two main things that have really helped is just having an incredible partner, and then my faith.
Thank you for sharing that. And definitely, having a great husband is
Yes,
very important.
it's so
Yeah,
important. I'm so
before you
thankful.
have children, you need to think about that first.
100%, yes. And
That's
like I
good.
said, we've been together for 13 years, and it actually has flown by, but it's exciting for us to be entering this new chapter together after so long together. It's also, it's a little bittersweet, right? It's like things are changing in such a big way, but we are really looking forward to this new journey together.
And you mentioned that he's a doctor, he's an eye doctor, right? So you were both in this kind of very challenging, very difficult path of advanced education. How did you also manage your relationship while you are both in these high stress environments and yeah, going through these challenges?
I think it worked really well that we were both going through it. I also think it helped that he wasn't in academia, he wasn't doing research, right? So we were both earning our doctorates, but our paths looked different. And I do think that helped, though I know there are many academics that have very happy relationships and they're both doing the same thing. I think for us, it helped to have a little bit of that separation.
Mhm.
But to be pursuing a similar path where we both understood the pressures and the challenges, for one of us to be able to support the other one when one of us was going through something that was a little bit more difficult, I think was really helpful as well, because there are ebbs and flows throughout any doctoral journey, right? So I think that helped immensely. And ultimately, I think we helped sort of support and guide each other along the way. I don't know if we could have done it without one another's support. I think
Mhm.
we were both really, really blessed to have that during our doctorate.
That's beautiful. I mean, people have very different opinions about that. Like for some people, I think it's important that their partner is not in the same environment because they don't want that amount of
Yeah.
stress put together. But it's good that you managed to kind of stay in oscillation, almost like, well, when one was a bit more down, the other one could pick it up and vice
Yes.
versa, right?
Yes, that helped a
Yeah.
lot. And he finished, I want to say a year before I defended my dissertation. So he was working for around a year or more while I was wrapping up, which was also a nice little time for us. That was a nice transition time. And then, ultimately we decided to come back to California, which is where we're both from. So it was really amazing to see this plan that we had put forth for ourselves from undergrad play out, right? After so many years, for in the past year alone, for me to have, gotten my degree conferral because I defended my dissertation in October and then got conferral around February time. So for me to get that, and I had my hooding ceremony in May, right after we got married, and then we moved back to California. So many things happened within this year. Obviously, now we're starting a family. So this 2025 was really so transformative for us.
Mhm.
And we're excited to see what 2026 brings, but it does feel like such a whirlwind.
Indeed, a lot of things all, yeah, all at
Yes.
the same time. And how did it feel to come back home, sort of, and leave such a huge chunk of your life behind, but also come back to your roots and
Hmm.
plant new roots as your new family, your own family?
Yes. It's been bittersweet. There have been ups and downs. I think we have both been homesick for Boston, maybe more homesick than we anticipated. And so that has been, a little bit challenging. But at the same time, we are closer to family now, which is going to be wonderful with having a baby. And so we are thankful for that. And like you said, we know that we're putting down roots here now, and we've never really had that before. We always knew that we were going to eventually leave San Francisco and eventually leave Boston. So it's nice to have this opportunity to put down roots. It's also unique for me because I moved around a lot growing up. So I never really had like a specific place that was home forever. And now we're kind of trying to make this home forever, at least for the foreseeable future. So it's a unique transition for me. And yeah, it's all new.
I'm sure that it's going to be a really exciting time also ahead as your son starts growing and you're able to share that with family and share like your favorite places and things like that with him. That's going to be so amazing and maybe will help a little bit with the homesickness for Boston.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that we are like 70 and sunny right now, and they are going through really some difficult weather challenges, that is helping a little bit too.
I'm a little bit envious.
I know.
I want sun. Yeah, it's been a long winter already. So coming back to what I mentioned before about like asking for help and maybe, being unapologetic and asking for help, asking for support, how did that work for you? Because I think it's also a learning curve, right? From being so independent and so like, okay, this is mine. I am going to find all the answers. I'm going to do everything myself to show how independent I am. And then you have to ask for help. You cannot do it
Right.
otherwise.
It's such a big identity shift. Even throughout pregnancy, learning to do that with my husband to ask for more help and to be willing to sit still for longer has been really challenging for me. But then also I have to, right? From between feeling sick and exhausted and all of the things that we go through, I've had to learn to slow down a lot, and it still is very much an internal battle. Um, and I know that moving forward, I am going to have to ask for help more. And I completely agree with you that it is difficult. And I know I'm going to struggle with sort of releasing some of that control and kind of making myself vulnerable enough to ask for help, right? That is challenging as well. So I know that there will be a lot of growth there, and I think it's one of those things where I'm just going to have to find my way once it happens. But I'm definitely aware that I will need it. And so sometimes one way that I've kind of reframed some of the realities of our circumstance is I'm thankful that I am in a position where I am going to be forced to ask for
Mm.
help because it's going to force me to invite in that village. And I think ultimately that will be really beneficial for my mental health as well.
I think it's, yeah, definitely going to force you to invite the village and also, as you mentioned, let go of control a little bit. Although I have to say, I'm 2.5 years into motherhood. I still struggle. So
Yeah.
I know that I need to ask for help. I know that I need to allow people to help. And sometimes the way they help is not exactly as I envision. And then I'm like,
I
yeah,
know.
but it's also a path of personal growth, right? As you learn to let go of control, and it's going to be super helpful as well in motherhood because definitely not everything we can control.
So much personal growth.
I think I also wanted to come back to what you mentioned about navigating navigating loss, navigating grief in early
Hmm.
pregnancy.
Yes.
First of all, I'm really sorry.
Thank
I
you.
Yeah. How did you manage to navigate that while still continuing to work? And
Yeah.
again, maybe conversations that happened, maybe asking for support. What was going on during that period, if you're open to sharing?
Yeah, definitely. So I had shared with the people that I was working with early on that we were pregnant. And I had told them, it's very early on, it is twins, weird. I'm sure, right? We knew that there was some risk there, but I needed to share because I knew that there was travel that was going to be coming up. and that if I wasn't able to attend, someone would need to take my place, right? Because we were leading conferences. So that was why I shared with them early on, um, which is vulnerable in itself. And then it was at 12 weeks when we learned that we had lost one of the twins. And so then I shared with them that that had happened. And because I was going to have to continue to undergo a lot of testing to make sure the other baby was healthy, right? There was still risk involved until we got confirmation about those things. And that would all take time. And so what's difficult, or what was difficult, is, the first trimester, I was quite sick, quite weak, but still managing to push through and work, sort of compartmentalizing things. And then to learn at the end of the first trimester, when you're finally just starting to feel a little bit better, that we had lost one of the babies, that sent me into a bit of a dark place, right? In one sense, I was so grateful that it seemed as though one of the babies was still healthy, they were continuing to grow, but then I was at the same time grieving, right, the loss of another one. And so that was a strange experience, to kind of balance both of those really strong emotions at the same time. I think as far as continuing to work, I really compartmentalized, for better or worse, in order to continue. And you know, um, just take it moment by moment and day by day. Again, I was fortunate to have a really supportive partner. And I think what I tried to do mostly is just let myself feel how I felt, right? Just kind of sit with it. Um, and so for most of the second trimester, I kind of was in that little bit of a difficult place. Um, of course, we're always going to carry some grief about it. That's just personally, how we feel, and everyone processes it differently. It has been helpful though sharing it, because in sharing it, we've learned that it's much more common than we knew or realized, and a lot of people just don't really share that experience. So that has been kind of helpful and offered us a sense of peace, as well as hearing other people's stories. I learned that one of the people that I work closely with, him and his wife experienced the same thing
Mm.
at one point. And so, I think when we're willing to make ourselves vulnerable and share, sometimes that support that we receive can be really helpful in our own healing process, and in helping us just sort of accept what our experience was. But yes, it was definitely a challenge. And like I mentioned, at the beginning of our conversation today, some people were very supportive and others were not. Others seemed to just be maybe inconvenienced by, what I was going through. And that was a tough pill to swallow, because you hear about these things, right? You hear about women not receiving support, um, in work when they decide to start a family or when they go through something like this. But until it happens to you, you don't really know, right? All of the, I don't know, the nuances and the emotions and feelings that can go into experiencing something like that. So, and a lot of it is very subtle, right? So I think just learning how to move through those types of feelings as well, and accept that it is the reality for a lot of women, right? In many ways, I had it really good that I was working from home, working remotely, largely setting my own schedule. So that helped me so much. And some women have it much more difficult than that. And then in other ways, I was a little bit shocked by the reactions from some people in my life. And I think that's, again, all part of the growth journey. It forces us to grow a lot personally as well, and to get clear on what our priorities are and what we do, want to be unapologetic about. And so learning to embrace that side of myself, coming into more of my strength as I prepare for motherhood, I think has been a big piece of maybe even my healing.
I see. Do you think this sense of like you're inconveniencing somebody, was it just people being sort of naturally uncomfortable with grief, loss, this kind of conversations, or is it there's just a layer of, like, as we talked about before, um, in academia or in adjacent environments, people think that all this personal stuff just has to be kind of set aside, compartmentalized, maybe to some extent a bit more, and then you kind of continue, you on you go with work.
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer. I think that both are valid ways of thinking about it, and both are definite possibilities. And there are probably other possibilities that we can't even imagine or think
Mhm.
of as far as why people react the way that they do. I definitely have learned that, and I learned this as well to an extent when my father passed away while during my PhD. When we go through these big life events, whether, it's wonderful, exciting things like getting married, having a wedding, or it's these really difficult moments of loss and grief it can be triggering to others, right? Because maybe they have experienced those things, and so it sort of takes them back to what they've experienced that they maybe haven't healed from or worked through themselves. Maybe it's something they're scared of experiencing, right? Who knows what it is, but other people have these reactions themselves to what we are experiencing sometimes. And so learning how to navigate through that and again, not own other people's reactions for what we're going through, personally and professionally,
Mhm.
I think is important for us to stay grounded, like you mentioned earlier. And so I've had to learn how to continue to do that. And like I mentioned, I experienced it when my father passed away. And then when we went through this as well, I experienced it again. And I'm sure I'll continue to experience and now recognize that, right? Because it's something I've gone through in the past. So now I'll recognize it moving forward, how these moments can just be triggering to others for whatever reason. And we can't be so dependent on how other people react to
Mhm.
what we're going through in order to find our own sense of peace with it.
Definitely, and maybe it's something that we kind of get better at with maybe age, with maturity, with experience, but it is a learning curve. It's difficult not to take on these emotions, these reactions from others.
Absolutely. I struggle with it immensely and will continue to hopefully learn new coping strategies.
Yeah.
But it is very, very difficult. And I think as women, we are so attuned to it, right? We're so attuned to these social cues and to how other people are feeling and to how, we think we're making other people feel. But again, just sort of releasing that, especially in the professional setting, I think is valuable and important to us to kind of maintain our own wellness, and our own ability to
Mhm.
move forward.
Definitely. I think it's sort of a safety strategy, right? It's a
Yeah.
survival instinct almost because we are like our safety maybe depends much more on like acceptance and yeah, being liked or being
Hmm.
seen in a certain way. But we we need to start to unlearn this
I know. It's hard.
collectively. Yeah. But you've been very open about these experiences. You've shared about this on Instagram and both about this loss in pregnancy and your father's passing and all the challenges. What made you be so vulnerable? Like, how did you arrive to that moment? Okay, I need to share these things because people don't talk about it enough, or what was your reasoning?
Yeah, I think, when I go through certain things that are big struggles, right? So whether it's loss and grief, or, I've shared so much on the Instagram about my challenges through the PhD, right? Interpersonal relationships and all of the struggles, harsh feedback, right? Things that really impacted my life. I think those are the moments where I just feel motivated to share with the hope that maybe it will help someone else that is going through it. I realized during the PhD, and this sort of gets back to the question you asked at the beginning that I didn't answer about why I started the Instagram. I realized early on that while I loved research and still do love research, I wasn't fully fulfilled. Like there was something that was missing for me, and I kind of found that, excuse me, I kind of found that in being able to share out with others some of the insights that I had gained along the way and being able to connect with people. It was something that I felt I was lacking during the PhD was that sense of connection and maybe belonging. And so I found that through the community and, hearing how my sharing had helped other people, I think was really impactful for me. And so it was ultimately just like a sort of calling to do that. And while I've slowed down immensely over the past year or so, I still really value it and hope to continue to share more as things continue to unfold. And now my life changes even more, right? And I'm starting to recognize that community too on Instagram of moms who are PhDs. And it's great to see and to see all of us kind of move through this next phase of life together and to learn from one another.
I think this is going to be also so helpful as you kind of like the account evolves, your journey continues, and you share about these different things and what you're going through right now. And it's going to be so helpful for people because honestly, I don't remember these conversations about motherhood in academia, around academia, as PhD, being visible at all. It was something that was kind of pushed
Yeah.
aside or swept under the rug a little bit, or like it's a thing that you just don't do, especially as a PhD student, for example. Just don't do this. Otherwise,
Right.
your supervisor is going to scream at you.
Yeah.
But it's good to have this more open, out in the open, and more visible for sure.
I think so too. I think it helps to empower us to learn what other people are going through, to learn when well, the thing that was always most comforting for me throughout my PhD was learning that my experiences were not unique because you are very isolated, right? And it can feel as though I am going through this terrible thing and I'm the only one that's going through this. And that's the worst way we can possibly feel, right? And so to share out and learn that others were going through it as well, and then that motivated even more sharing, I think was really powerful. And if we can kind of open up these conversations and be more transparent and remove some of the stigma, it can be very empowering for us.
This was exactly, I'm so happy you mentioned this. This was exactly my next point because I did a little bit of snooping on your website in preparation for today, and there was a post, like a blog post there, where you mentioned that it's not unique, it's ubiquitous. And
Right.
this was my thinking back in the day when I was doing my PhD, and I keep thinking, and your account is one of the accounts that makes me kind of reflect on that more. Like, what would have happened if I had Instagram back when I was doing my PhD? Because I only started it later after I quit.
Mm,
And just knowing that people are going through similar things or even worse things sometimes,
right.
and
Yeah.
just knowing that it's not just me who is struggling. And my situation was a bit different because I was part of a cohort of 20 people, but somehow even within that cohort you are prone to thinking that everybody else has their stuff together and you are the only one who doesn't.
Right.
And then once I created my Instagram account and saw that there is a whole world out there. I was like, oh my God, people do struggle. I was not the
Yes.
only one.
Yes.
Maybe, maybe it would have been a completely different journey, completely different situation, because for sure, seeing um, the stories being shared, being like people being open, people being vulnerable about these things normalizes it so much. And also you get a lot more maybe a sense of like your own resilience from there, and that people can do it, you can also do it probably.
Right.
And there are so many strategies and tips and things that you've shared over the years that could be really amazing for people, and maybe would have been amazing for me back then.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I agree. I think it really does require a lot of support. And so we a lot of times we don't receive that support in our programs. And so I do think so many of us are supplementing, right, in any way that we can. And it seems like the social media community has been one big piece for many of us to help supplement that support and those connections. I think that higher education has a lot of changing and transformation that needs to take place in order for it to not just keep up with current times, but in order to address a lot of the challenges, the mental and physical health challenges that PhD students face as a result of the dynamic and the system.
For me, it was also really helpful to see that yes, it is a lot of these things are systemic,
Hmm.
and definitely academia is like there are things to change, things to a lot of things to improve, but also
Yeah.
I so when I was in a PhD program, I was thinking, okay, it's the system and it's just so bad and it's horrible and I cannot work with that. But then out of it, looking back, I thought, okay, there is actually so many of my own personal things that I haven't worked on and that
Mhm.
were coming into play and just making this perfect storm with the academic environment and with publish or perish culture and perfectionism that comes with it and everything in between that I could have done so much
Mhm.
with myself, within myself, and
Right.
maybe, not blame it all on the system, but definitely there is all, yeah, all systemic issues as well that should be addressed. And
Yeah, no, I think that you raise a really, really important point. And it's something I've been reflecting on recently too, how when we are in it, some of those challenges that we face, we think that they are specific to the PhD, and that once we finally defend, once we finally finish and move on, we won't deal with this anymore. And
Mhm.
that's not the case. They follow us.
Yeah.
They follow us into our next job. And so I do think that that self-reflection and kind of being willing and vulnerable enough to recognize our own opportunities for growth is important to long-term career and just success in life generally.
Mhm.
And so it is important, I think, for us to maybe be again, more transparent about, well, some of these things, such as having to manage the egos of others, which is a huge challenge in academia, that also exists in work after academia, even if you leave and go into a different industry.
Mm.
And so it's, again, I think important for us to learn how we can grow within ourselves, professionally and personally, and then also sort of identify and develop coping mechanisms and different strategies to help us navigate some of those challenges. Because, yes, you are correct that while there are a lot of systemic issues, there's also just human challenges that we will encounter anywhere that we go. And I think in order to really gain the most that we can from the PhD, it's just as important to do that inner work as it is to learn more about our dissertation topic and, those types of skills.
Definitely, and I think it's not given enough time of day
No,
within the system, but also by people
no,
themselves. Like you get so focused, so like laser focused on your research topic, your area, and then you kind of don't realize that there's all the other things that are playing a role in it.
right.
But
We receive
speaking,
such little guidance as well. So
yeah,
it can't
absolutely,
all fall on the PhD student, right? It
yeah,
really there needs to be some changes, I think, within leadership and the way that mentorship is approached.
yeah,
Because in the same way that there's so little that we are explicitly taught during a PhD,
hmm,
right? Our mentors, our advisors, they also likely weren't explicitly taught on how to be
for
an
sure.
effective mentor. So it sort of just perpetuates across generations. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it can't all fall on the student, and
Of
everyone
course.
needs to do a lot of inner work.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you're right that the supervisors, PIs were also not taught back in the day, and
Right.
a lot of them don't really reflect on that and continue perpetuating this. So it's kind of snowballing the trauma often.
Exactly.
Yeah. But speaking of like personal growth, and since pregnancy, as we discussed, offers a lot of opportunities to do that, how would you say it changed your approach to specifically like work and productivity, um, time management, maybe something like that?
Yeah, I think it has pushed me to be even more efficient than I was. And I think motherhood will continue to do that. Learning to, again, just be really efficient, mindful with my time, which isn't always easy. I think too, you spoke about perfectionism a little bit earlier, and many of us, I think, struggle with that. Have struggled immensely with perfectionism throughout my life and throughout my academic journey, and I'm continuing to kind of unravel that and let it go and learn, that good enough is enough a lot of the time and start to also I'm trying to think of a tactful way to say this, but realize that the other people that we work with, they are still highly respected and successful even when it seems like their effort is maybe less than what I sometimes hold myself to, and realizing maybe I hold myself to unnecessary standards, right? Maybe it's not even that they're unrealistic, I can do it, but maybe I don't need to try so hard. Maybe the product can still be just as good or even better in ways if I kind of just let go a little bit and relax, and allow some space and opportunity for imperfection. Maybe, that actually ends up being more effective in the long run and will help me connect with others, which I've realized is a very important piece to the work that we do once we finish the PhD. So I think learning to let go of the perfectionism, learning to, in that sense, be more efficient with my time where I'm able to determine, okay, this is enough, this is good enough, has been helpful for me, and probably a little bit healing as well.
I think what you mentioned about imperfection, like allowing space for imperfections, really ties really beautifully into your the whole thing about authenticity and vulnerability. And it is about imperfection and, showing that imperfect side to the world.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Okay, so let's start slowly winding down from there. I'm
Okay.
going to be also mindful of your time. Maybe a few last things. Like if you look back at yourself in your PhD, for example, at the
Mhm.
beginning, early stages of your PhD, what would you say to that younger version of yourself? Maybe about your PhD journey, maybe about the chapters ahead, the motherhood, or anything at all.
Oh gosh, it's honestly so challenging to think about that person now, right? Obviously I'm so proud of her for, making it, and then I'm also aware of all the challenges that she is going to experience throughout that time. So it's difficult to think about, but I would say, you know, um, sort of to just trust myself throughout the experience and yeah, I guess just keep going, one piece of advice that I received from a PhD student my first semester, she was just finishing. She was defending when I started. I remember one day we were in the office and she said to me, "There are going to be hard times." And that was the best piece of advice I received throughout my PhD. I always went back to that.
Mm,
And it sounds like such a simple statement, but I realized more and more as the years went on that that was so profound.
mm.
And um, I think I would probably just, make sure that I pass that on to myself, make sure that I heard that because it actually did help me. I think in one sense, it exposed the fact that I wasn't going to be alone, right? That she had had hard times and I would be no different. I would have hard times too. It shows the fact that you identify the hard times, which means there are also good moments. So sometimes it feels like they're very fleeting and hard to come by. There are good moments that we have to really savor when we do encounter them, and that it wouldn't last forever. So yeah, I think that is just a really valuable piece of advice, and I'm sure that I will find that applies to motherhood as well.
I was just going to ask you what would you say to academic parents or parents to be, but I think that's also perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it does fit very well. Yeah. But for one last moment, coming back to parenthood in academia or around academia, do you do you think things are changing with how academia is approaching parenthood, caregiving, these roles, or it's still, bad?
It's a good question. I think it probably varies again by the inner community, right? So it's like it probably varies depending on the department and the university and the colleagues and if there is that culture. And so I would say that to anyone who, if you are, let's say, applying for positions as a professor, for instance, I would pay attention to that, right? And even ask those questions. If people in the department have families or starting families, at what stage of life is everyone, and how are these things treated or valued? I think it's important to gain that insight. I also think that unfortunately we have to initiate that change, right? It's our time now. And we have to claim that, right? We have to claim the fact that no, this is our time to decide what academia is going to be like. And
Mm,
if we want those things to change, then we have to be willing to do that really uncomfortable work and change them ourselves, which I know again can be very intimidating and scary because we worry, what if I'm not respected because I become a mother, which sounds like an awful thing to say, but unfortunately, I think we know very well as women that we can feel that way sometimes, that we can feel
absolutely.
scared that we'll no longer be respected in our professional capacity if we start a family. And so we have to kind of just be strong and push through that, I think, even though it sounds sort of simple, in order to initiate that change ourselves and take that
Mhm.
responsibility ourselves.
I really love the fact that, yeah, we are the change, and it's our time to decide how academia is going to look like. I think we yeah, we all need to think about it and take this responsibility, because otherwise, nothing changes if we are also not willing to put any work into changing it. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can hope that systems can catch up, and it's not only going to be on an individual level, or only
Right.
all the work being put on an individual, but we have to start somewhere. So why not start ourselves?
Exactly.
All right, I think that's a great that's a great point to finish it. We are the change. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. I think this conversation is going to be also helpful to a few people I know that are thinking about starting a family, because there was a lot that you said about identity, a lot about personal growth that is going to be resonating with these people. So I hope we have more conversations like this in academia. This has to be, things have to be said. It's not unique to academia, the challenges that women face starting to have a family, starting to plan for a family, but academia kind of adds another
Yes.
level of difficulty there. So we have to talk about it. And I'm so glad that I managed to talk about it with you.
Thank you so much. It's been great speaking with you today, and I hope you and I can also have more conversations moving forward.
Boy mom to boy mom, if you have any
Yes,
questions.
I know. I'm like, I will be reaching out. You're part of my village
Definitely.
now.
Definitely. I'm super happy to be. As I mentioned, I'm very passionate about the whole concept, and sometimes the village is online, and so be it.
Yes,
We have to deal with it. And also that's amazing, because we can connect with people on the other side of the planet, which is
so true.
pretty exciting.
It
Well,
is
thank you
exciting.
again, and thank you to everybody listening. I hope you will join us again for another coffee, or this time herbal tea fueled conversation, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
All right. Thank you.